Where I don't even think it's a tough call. I would definitely vote for Biden because either in that situation, even if other people are running, either the Democrat or the Republican is going to win. And in my estimation, Biden has definitely passed what I would describe as my bare minimum purity test. And I think if it's him or Trump or even him or DeSantis or anybody, he just blows them out of the water. And so I think I'd happily vote for Biden in that instance. Your response?
So I similarly was voting for Jill Stein in New York in 2016.
I did the same.
And I also happen to believe that strategically it makes the most sense to apply pressure to the Democratic Party by voting for not Biden in a primary. Marianne Williamson is obviously the most progressive candidate in the primary, and then vote for Cornel West in the general. And I know there are a lot of people in my audience who are frustrated by that plan because they think that it takes something away from Cornel West's run, or it affirms the Democratic Party in some way to vote for Marianne Williamson running as a Democrat. I don't feel that way. I feel it's a little hypocritical to have that position, given that we all just enthusiastically voted for Bernie twice in the primary the last two rounds. You can make a distinction saying that Bernie was an independent and he always identified as an independent, and Marianne Williamson doesn't have that kind of cloak of distance from the Democratic Party. You can say what you want. I don't see those things as mutually exclusive in the least. So that is also my plan. I differ from you only insofar as that I would say it's a more difficult choice in a swing state to decide what you're going to do. But I frankly respect people who feel comfortable. It has not been something that I have to contend with, but I respect people who feel comfortable voting third party even in swing states. And the reason is this, and it goes back to that early bad faith viral Noam Chomsky interview, in which I asked him about a month before the 2020 race. Look, I said, I take your point. Let's say Trump is an existential threat. Let's say that he's a unique threat among all Republican candidates. My concern is that every year, because we all vote for blue no matter who, because most Democrats vote blue no matter who, or most left-leaning people do, the message that gets sent out is that Democrats don't have a bar. You can go as low as you want, as close to the Democratic Party as you, Republican Party as you want, and there's a ratchet to the right effect. And Republicans know that they can keep being more and more extreme. And so I want you to explain to me what you predict to be the stopping point at which we're no longer saying this new Republican is the worst that has ever happened. This new Republican is the worst that has ever happened. Tell me you're not going to be saying the same thing about Ron DeSantis or Vivek Ramaswamy or whatever other person comes down the pike.
That is a really good point there by Bree. And, Bree and I had this conversation recently, a similar conversation recently on bad faith. That is the good point, is like, there's always going to be someone, there's always going to be a Trump. There's always going to be a Ron DeSantis. There's always going to be so if you continue to use that excuse, then you're never going to really try to start any type of third party movement. The other question that I have is, what happened to Kyle where it's now at the point where he will vote for Joe Biden? I feel like it's just really weird to me. Like, we got to vote for Joe Biden so we don't get the other people. Honestly, like, what happened to not giving our vote, not giving our energy and our power away to the Democrat establishment? Also, what happened to Marianne Williamson? So this is the part I'm a little bit confused by. Krystal and Kyle, they're the ones that asked Marianne to run. So what happened to, y'all just gave up on Marianne now? Like, this is the part I'm just a little bit, this is weird. This is so weird to me. So what Kyle is telling you, which is what we acknowledged in the very beginning when Marianne announced that she was running, Kyle is telling you that Marianne has no chance at the nomination, which is what we told you from the very beginning, because the DNC rigs the primaries. This is also going to take us into the RFK story I have too. So this is actually perfect setup. So, well, what's the point? Let's continue. Oh, man.
And he was unable, in my subjective view, to respond credibly to that claim. So if somebody could tell me strategically what the stopping point is going to be of making this argument of the lesser of two evils, I would be open to the idea that, okay, this is the last one. Donald Trump, fine. He tried to steal the election, fine. That is a new line that he has crossed. But absent an acknowledgement that we are creating our own destiny by lowering the bar in these ways, I'm not comfortable coming out and criticizing anybody who no longer wants to be complicit in that kind of a system that's enabled the Democratic Party to not have a primary, treat Marianne Williamson as badly as they've treated her, treat Bernie Sanders as badly as they treated him, and openly come out and say they don't have to hold a free, fair election. The DNC argued that in court, you know?
And what they're doing to RFK Jr. right now, which we'll also get into.
So let me explain a little bit of my position. I think that'll help respond to some of what you said there. And I'm also curious to dig in a little bit more to your analysis of how the Biden administration has actually been in reality. So last election in 2020, I did live in a swing state. I lived in Virginia, still live in Virginia, registered in Virginia. And it did not feel good to vote for Joe Biden, but I decided to vote for Joe Biden, which is something I said publicly at the time.
It didn't feel good to vote for Joe Biden, but you voted for him anyway. Why do people vote against their own interests? Why do people do this, guys? Like, you don't have to, like, here's the thing. You really ain't got to show up at all. You could just stay at home.
But I said something very similar to you, which is like, listen, this was not easy for me. If you, wherever you live, swing state, not swing state, etc., you do whatever you analyze is the right thing to do. And the reason that I voted for him primarily at that time, even though I thought he had an atrocious record in the Senate, even though, you know, complicit in the Iraq War, complicit in bad trade deals, complicit, you know, like terrible things on crime, all that stuff, right? The primary reason I voted for him was because of the National Labor Relations Board. And because...
Oh, because of the National Labor Relations Board. But Joe Biden was the one blocking the railroad workers from going on strike. So how good did that do? This is funny. You guys are right. This is a trip.
Labor politics and building out union power in this country, to me, is one of the most important goals, and something that I think we all share and leftists generally believe. Now, in retrospect, not only do I feel good about that vote, he's actually surprised me. Now, I've got all kinds of issues, right?
You feel good about that vote after he stopped the railroad workers from going on strike? After he even intervened when it came to UPS? Really?
On the National Labor Relations Board, though, specifically, they just issued a ruling which could be a complete game changer for unions. And just to explain to people a little bit, basically, in the past, bosses could union bust with impunity, no accountability. Now, the process going forward is completely changed. If bosses are caught union busting, then that's it. There's no more election. It's canceled. They have to recognize the union and start bargaining with them.
Krystal, honey. Krystal, you sweet summer child. If they are caught, you don't think these union bosses know how to skirt around the edges? You don't think they know how to have these little loopholes so that they're not caught? It just, you know, the bar is so low. Why are we stopping at unionization? Why aren't we expanding this conversation to worker cooperatives? Do you see what I mean about the left? And I had this conversation earlier with someone today that the left ain't really going nowhere. It's like every year the bar just gets lower and lower and lower. And eventually we've moved closer and closer to Democrat establishment to the point where there really is no left. Sweet summer child.
That's the biggest shift in labor relations we've had in our lifetime. So that's why at this point, I'm not only, you know, it's likely to, I'm a Marianne supporter as well, but we can all see the most likely outcome is it's going to be Trump versus Biden.
Then why are you still... I can't wait. I can't, guys. All right, I'm gonna stop stopping it so much. I'm sorry.
Not only would I say that protecting the Biden National Labor Relations Board isn't important enough for me to vote for Joe Biden, but it is important enough that I would actively encourage, but I'm not going to shame them for whatever they decide to do, but I would actively encourage people who are in a swing state to vote for Joe Biden, if for no other reason than to protect that board.
So I think that's
For an incompetent president that can barely walk and talk, Krystal is okay with you supporting the Crypt Keeper Like, this is some weird, I know he can't really form sentences together right now or string sentences together. I know he's falling all over the place and he doesn't really know where he is half the time, but vote for him anyway. This guy has his hand on the nukes and you're telling people do it anyway. This is why the left has failed. The left has no backbone. The left has no spine. And those of us who stood up against these things and still continue to say hell to the no, we're the ones that are demonized. We're the ones that are criticized for holding on to those same principles that people like Krystal and Kyle, who a lot of us introduced a lot of us to this type of progressivism, have just openly just walked away from. I don't even know, like, I've never met Krystal and Kyle, but to me, it's very obvious. Seemed like to me, there's been some selling out that's been going on. Because they look completely different. Kyle Kalinske looks like he's trying to be a Backstreet Boy from 1998. Krystal looked like she's trying to make herself be younger. Like, I don't know. These people just, these don't seem like the same people, man. These don't seem like the same people I watched 4 years ago. What happened to these people? Let me go on.
It's a perfectly defensible position. And I had this conversation on my podcast in the last episode, and there were people who would characterize that position as, I mean, you've heard the thing, you've been on the internet, being too credulous about Biden or, being too comfortable in one's own position in life and not needing enough change and being happy with the status quo. People will say things like that. I think actually that if your priority, if you believe the path to meaningful change is going to primarily come through a kind of, I don't say this dismissively, but a kind of labor incrementalism, meaning there are meaningful labor gains that happen, but are not the type of which would radically transform the system the way that some people want to happen in a shorter term. And the way that some people might argue Bernie Sanders represented his movement as the goal of being, then that's a defensible position. But I have to hold space for the reality that there are people for whom, even as significant as those labor gains are, it's simply insufficient. And what they see when they look at the trajectory of the last 50, 60 years of Democratic Party politics, when they read Listen Liberal and see the longer game, the Democratic Party making a concerted choice to back away from labor in a way that has gone on for decades and isn't necessarily turning around as a consequence of Joe Biden having some good NLRB appointments.
So let me
just pause here for just a second before I pass it back over to them. The labor issue, let me tell you why you can't just rely on that. Because basically that excludes the people who can't work because they're on disability. See, this is the thing. This is the problem with that idea of fighting for those union gains and the labor movement and just focusing on that, not being the sole reason. What about the people who are locked out of labor? The people who are on disability, so they can't work because of that. Not everyone that has disability is prohibited from working, but there is a significant amount of people that are prohibited from working because of their disability status. When Krystal talks about these union wins and these labor gains and yada, yada, that does nothing for the people who can't physically work. The people who still live, they get a disability check, which is very small. My mother's on disability, so I know. That does nothing for those people. So it's, the union wins are not helping the disabled community. So you still have to have those progressive policies to come in and help those people. And I have to continue saying this. I think I mentioned disability last night too. I feel like those people are forgotten about. And we need to stop pretending like they're not a part of this conversation, right? All right, let's pass it on.
And then I want to jump into it.
So number one, I don't think that in like massively increasing union density, I actually don't see that as incremental change. I mean, if you look at the chart of the decline in the middle class and the decline of union density, you'd be hard pressed to find a more significant factor.
I made these arguments as well.
But the other piece is, I feel like those same people who are right about the Democratic Party, they were right about the analysis in Listen Liberal, right about the fact that you had, this free trade bipartisan consensus, and in large part a union busting bipartisan consensus, also don't acknowledge that there actually has been a notable shift in the Biden administration. Now, my big issue with the Biden administration, I mean, there's a million
What shift?
of them, right? On foreign policy, I've got problems. But my biggest issue economically with the Biden administration is the way they've allowed the pandemic relief, the short-term pandemic relief programs to fall away and leave a lot of ordinary Americans in a more precarious financial position now than they were at the beginning of the administration. And that's not nothing. But when I look at the long term, when I look at the fact that, listen, with the Inflation Reduction Act, with the CHIPS Act, with infrastructure investment, you're talking about industrial policy in a way that would have been completely unheard of in the Clinton-Obama era. When you look at not just the NLRB, which I said is like the core for me, but also his antitrust appointments and the fact they're really trying to reverse decades of neoliberal attack on any sort of trust busting, I feel like none of those improvements that have made Biden on that front way better than Obama, way better than Clinton. I just feel like there's no willingness to acknowledge any of that whatsoever.
There's no willing to, first of all, we did cover those stories when those things did happen. The reason why we're not bragging about it, unlike you, Krystal, is because those things that you mentioned don't fundamentally change people's lives. Those things that you mentioned don't put food on the table. Those things that you mentioned don't help people with the child care issue in this country. Those things that you mentioned do not put money in people's pockets and change their lives. That's the big difference. And I wouldn't have to explain this to Krystal if she understood how the average American lives in this country. When you're a millionaire, it's easy to sit back and say, let me sing these praises of Joe Biden, these legislations that's passed in reference to infrastructure, et cetera, because you know why? Joe Biden's economy is not really affecting people like you. Joe Biden's economy is affecting people like me, like JB, like CJ, like Nick, and like Rome. But for you, for people like Krystal and Kyle, ultimately, they're not affected. Let's continue. Boy, I tell you.
I don't think the issue is acknowledging it. It's how much it matters to you, how weighty that is to you, and how much you see those kind of calm and meaningful improvements as really core to the nature of the project that you're on. And I think that what some people are frustrated by is that this went from feeling like, in both left media and left politics, a bigger revolutionary project that was going to the core of our capitalist system and wanting to radically change the way that human lives are valued, what we consider to be the nature of our social safety net, what we believe to be the nature of what we consider to be human rights. And they wanted to join a movement that validated what many of us felt intrinsically, emotionally for most of our lives, that something in the milk very much wasn't clean. And Bernie came along and articulated that it was legitimate for us to be asking for something more. And so at this point, it does feel as though there has been a kind of a bait and switch. It's not that what you're describing isn't true or legitimate. And I said this on my podcast. If your priorities are what you have kind of articulated your priorities as being, I think it's a perfectly legitimate argument. But I have to hold space for the fact that for many people, it simply is inadequate.
Wait, can I respond?
Yeah,
let me jump in here.
And Krystal is always welcome to have that conversation with the people that she's referring to, by the way. Krystal is afraid to have that conversation with people like me, people like Hardlands Media, people like Due Dissidents. She's afraid to have that conversation with us because she don't really want to talk to the people who's having to deal with these material conditions. So it's almost like Bree has to basically speak for us. You know what I mean? Because Krystal, she don't really want to hear, she knows us, by the way, but Krystal, she don't want to have this conversation with us because she know Bree is very calm here. And some of the things that I would say, like, I wouldn't do like personal attacks. Whoopsie. I wouldn't do like mean-spirited personal attacks, but I would tell Krystal, you are a millionaire. You really can't tell me what I should be happy with in reference to Joe Biden's policies. You really can't. It's just hilarious to me.
My issue is that many people on the left are, I would say, dishonestly refusing to acknowledge any good things that were done. We could all on the left list, like, here's the 57 things we hate that Biden did. But when something good happens, I'm the only one talking about it, and then I get accused of being a DNC shill.
Because you are a DNC shill. Because if you go back and watch Secular Talk from 2-3 years ago, honey, your rhetoric has completely changed. So yes, you are a DNC shill. And I find it to be very interesting that you started to change your rhetoric when you got with Krystal. You're not believable. Kyle is not, you are not believable, Kyle. You look like a showman right now. You have gone far and far away from the average, ordinary American as the years have gone on. Let's keep it real. Kyle used to be in like this little studio basement kind of thing. Looked kind of cool and chill and down with the people. But ever since you got connected with Krystal, you're looking a little bit wealthy to me, son. Your suits look a little bit more expensive. You got the fancy studio. You seem very out of touch with people. And to keep it real, if you had that conversation with those people, maybe then you'd understand. But you're not willing to have that conversation with those people because you know we would call your ass out. You don't want to admit it. Now you wanted that David Pakman audience. That's what you got now. So now you got to continue using that same bullshit. Let's keep moving.
Now, I'm not blind. I think in order to be intellectually honest, you have to look at, here's the good things that happen. Here's the bad thing that happened. I'm going to give them all to you. And then you could judge how much you value each and which one you weigh more and how.
Define good. See, that's the thing. What's good for some is not good for others. I'm looking at who is changing material conditions of the lives of people in this country. And I have not seen that happen through Joe Biden's policies. So to me, that shit don't fucking matter, Kyle. You think people in the hood are honestly like, damn, I got to pick up an extra shift this week so I can pay this light bill. But I sure am excited about that infrastructure bill that Biden got passed. Give me a break. Ah, damn. I got laid off. I got to try to find another job. I'm not going to be able to pay for daycare this month. But did you guys hear about this legislation that Joe Biden did in reference to the labor committee that really is not helping me out at all because I just got fucking laid off? Let's keep it real, people. Let's keep it real.
That factors into your like voting analysis. But I was like the poster boy back in the day, or people viewed me this way, as like, he's the purity tester. He's like the main purity tester guy. And I didn't vote for Biden in 2020 because I didn't think he would pass my purity test. Now, at the time,
it's not 2020 no more. It's 2023. Next.
People could go back and watch the video. My purity test was super fucking lenient. It was like, if I'm convinced you're going to do like 2 or 3 of the things that I value highly, then I would vote for you. Because I know it's basically down to just the Democrat and the Republican, no matter how much we want to wish the Green Party or libertarians want to wish the Libertarian Party into existence. And so when I look at the record, again, I could list all the bad things, but she just mentioned the NLRB raising overtime pay, or you mentioned the thing where, you know, they automatically recognize the union if the bosses try to bust it up. There's also the overtime pay rule where now it's not $33,000, it's about $55,000 a year, where now you get overtime pay. That's a huge, huge change. Student loan debt reduction, and even Biden even coming back after the Supreme Court tried to slap it down, and he said, no, I'm going to try to do it through the Higher Education Act now.
See, again, Kyle, this is where you are, you sad little child. This is what you don't understand. Those changes that you just said a huge change is not huge for average people. That's not huge. The student debt cancellation, the $10,000, that don't really do nothing for me. Hell, that's going to go to the interest first any damn way. That's this is huge. Yes, huge to you because you're a fucking millionaire. I don't see y'all motherfuckers struggling to pay no damn grocery bill. Are you struggling to put gas in your car? No. It's a mess.
There's little things we could go after. Oh, the interest rate. Yes, that's bad. I agree with you on that. But we got to recognize that that is, all things considered, a step in the right direction. Pulling out of Afghanistan, he actually had the balls to do it, even when the media was shitting on him relentlessly. And I didn't see anybody on the left coming into his defense at that point in time.
A lot of
We didn't come to his defense at that point, Kyle, because he didn't pull all the soldiers out of Afghanistan. And he also issued sanctions on the people in Afghanistan. And the kids were starving because of the sanctions, which you did not want to talk about. It just did the what? This is why they don't talk to us, guys. This is why they don't want to have that conversation with us.
people of
I was like the only fucking one. It was like me and Matt Iglesias.
I definitely defended him.
Okay,
Yeah.
well then it's like 3 people. I didn't, and all these. Oh, I'm so anti-war. He pulls out of Afghanistan, and it gets messy because that's what happens when you pull out of wars. And all of a sudden, oh my God, it's the
I thought that
the
was
end of the
actually a
world.
good moment for the left. I saw a lot of consensus. Good on you, because we almost resented and kind of were enjoying the extent to which he was getting, dogpiled by the mainstream media, and we were the only ones defending him. So I would quibble with that a little bit.
And Kyle, you were not the only one who talked about Joe Biden pulling troops out of Afghanistan. Get your head out your ass.
I didn't see much defending him. I really didn't.
Kyle, what people are responding to, if I can offer this, is not the idea that you are accurately describing advancements, good things that Joe Biden is doing. I think you could also say Obama did some good things.
No, Biden is way better than Obama, not even close.
That's not the point I'm making.
That was not the. See this? You see what's happening? No, Obama's not better than Biden, not even close. That's not what she said. You see how he all ready to go on the defense? You guys see what's happening, right? You see how he's all ready to go on the defensive? I remember Kyle switched his position on Obama too. I remember when Obama first got in office, Kyle was like, "Oh man, this is the best thing ever." Da da da. Then I remember he was like, "Oh yeah, I give him a grade of like a D and da da da." You're not reliable, son. You're not reliable. You've been hanging out with Krystal too long. This is very obvious. Very obvious. You sound like a shill. Kyle Kalinske turned into David Pakman. And they used to always go at it with each other. They used to argue and go back and forth. Kyle Kalinske turned into David Pakman. I never thought I'd see it.
Okay.
It's not that one is better than the other. You could also sit here and say Obama did good things. Now, the way you bristled at me saying that, I could say, oh, why won't you just acknowledge that Obama did good things? The same way that you're saying that leftists won't acknowledge, they bristle when you acknowledge that Biden did good things. And it's because we have different standards and we're making different kinds of comparisons.
But that's not my issue, because they're not even acknowledging the good things, is my point. I have a list of 47 things here, and I've heard nobody talk about any of them.
But
this is where Kyle likes to exaggerate. He's always saying, nobody said this. It was only me. That's a damn lie. Hardlin's media covered these things. See, I watch this stuff, so I know who covered and what didn't cover. RBN even covered those things. The problem is we didn't cover it in the way that Kyle thinks is appropriate. That's the problem. Who's watching all of the smaller channels? Who's watching all the small channels? We usually watch the smaller channels. Is Kyle watching all these small channels? Let's continue.
let me get to the core of this point. The reason that people are frustrated with that kind of analysis is because it's been used for so long by liberals to justify why people shouldn't be asking for more. I'm not saying that that's what you're doing. But if you bring up something like student debt, when the consensus of all of the student debt experts that I've talked to on my podcast, people from the Debt Collective, the Asher Taylors of the world, the legal experts I brought on, is that there was a path toward doing this, to canceling all student debt that would not have been stymied by the Supreme Court. The same authority that Donald Trump used to enact the student debt moratorium, which has been ongoing until beginning of this month for the last 3 years, was the same authority that he could have canceled all student debt with a stroke of a pen. He chose not to do that because he decided to means test the program. He circulated those documents. I got one in my inbox last August, I believe it was, to see if you qualify for student debt. It was a very easy form. But when he did that, that started the clock for people to be able to challenge it in court, which 6 states did, 2 of them were successful, and now here we are today. Not only did he decline to do the unstoppable mechanism to actually cancel all student debt, he additionally chose to use a legal authority, which when many legal experts said was the most vulnerable one. So you're now saying,
No.
he could have used the Higher Education Act.
He did. He did. He invoked it.
He could have done that in the first instance.
But he didn't, and now he tried it again through the Higher Education Act. The idea.
You know what? Like, I honestly, like, are these people paid? Are Krystal and Kyle paid by the DNC just like Harry Sisson is? Is that what's happening here? Because Kyle is obviously missing Bree's point. The point is he was instructed from the very beginning to use the Higher Education Act, and he chose not to. He made it more complicated than it needed to be, and he could have canceled all of it. And I don't know how many times Bree has explained this. Like, she's talked about this multiple times on her show and on other shows. And he's just so quick to jump in and defend Joe Biden. And my question is, why the hell are you trying to defend a politician so damn much?
That it's like it's a conspiracy, he doesn't want to actually cancel it. No, he appealed the case like 4 or 5 times,
Kyle,
and then at the end of it, when the Supreme Court said no, you can't do that, he said fuck you, I can, and he did the Higher Education Act. That's exactly what we wanted him to do. Then he does it, and people go, oh, that's not good enough. And it's like,
no, that is not what we wanted him to do. Was to cancel all of it, Kyle, which he could have done by executive order. That's the thing. He thinks he knows what we wanted.
that's ridiculous.
There, Kyle. What we wanted him to do was first and foremost just cancel the student
No.
debt.
I expected him to do nothing on student debt. This is the point I'm trying to get across to you, is that I expected nothing from Biden, and he did way more than I expected. Let's be honest about that.
It's not about your expectations. We have different expectations.
Of course I'm going to talk about it through my expectations. I'm me.
But I want to pivot this conversation a little bit, because what we really have is a tactical disagreement. We could quibble about student loan debt. We could quibble about all kinds of aspects of the Biden administration. All of us would like him to do more. There's no doubt about that. But hold on a second. Our political aims are ultimately very similar. But I do think the student loan debt example is instructive, because it shows what has been effective in terms of securing real gains versus what has been ineffective. Jill Stein running in 2016, I don't think she was a spoiler, but the Democratic Party thinks she was a spoiler. They put that out to the public. So in the theory of
who cares what the Democratic Party put out to the public, Krystal? It seems like to me, you care what the Democratic Party thinks. I don't care what the Democratic Party thinks. So again, I ask, are these people being paid? Did DNC consultants get to Krystal and Kyle? Why do you care what the Democratic Party thinks so much? This is a YouTube show, no? This is wild, man. This is wild.
Change where a third party would force all of this revolutionary change on the Democratic Party, that should have worked. But instead, it served.
That is not what we want. This is another thing that has constantly been misrepresented. The third party voters, the people, especially the ones who traditionally vote third party, the idea from them is not, let's vote third party, and so it's going to put pressure on the DNC. Those people traditionally that are third party voters are not thinking that way. They're voting for the people based on the policy and outside of a corporate duopoly. This is something that Krystal, I believe, has imagined in her mind. The third party voters are not saying, okay, maybe the Democratic Party will change for us and move in ways for us right now. They're not thinking that way. They're thinking the Democratic Party and the Republican Party are corrupt, and we don't want fuck shit to do with them. That's what they're thinking. The only people trying to work inside the Democratic Party is you. The only people who think you can reform the Democratic Party, it's you. Those of us who vote third party, we know there is no reform. We know you can't change it. We know it's corporate. You still trying to tango with the Democratic Party. It's this I can't.
To allow the Democratic Party to basically demonize and dismiss third party efforts, and then they prop up Joe Biden. So that definitely didn't work. However, the fact that Joe Biden had to be on a primary debate stage versus Bernie and Marianne and a whole lot of Elizabeth Warren, a whole lot of other people who were pushing him on student loan debt cancellation, forced him into a position of doing something when he 100% would have done nothing otherwise. And we can see that now because, the fact that they've basically
Actually, that came from the activists. I'm sorry, we need to give credit to the activist organizations. That pressure came from activist groups like the Debt Collective that have been championing for this and pushing for this for quite some time. And also that combined with a pandemic that put a lot of people out of work in this country. So you have to talk about both of those things. And the fact that she dismisses or doesn't talk about the work that happened on the outside with the activists that championed against the student debt, that goes to show me that, again, there is something there that is out of touch with the average American people. How do you not know this? You've been in media longer than me. How do you not know that those people, I brought multiple people on this show that were student loan activists, and they explained how they did this from the get-go. They put that pressure on not just Joe Biden, but members of Congress. So it started on the outside first. It did not start within the inside of the goddamn Democratic Party. Now, I'm willing to give credit where credit is due, but I'm getting really tired of people giving kudos to the Democrat politicians for something that was started by the activists on the outside first. Tired.
Blocked any sort of real democratic process within the Democratic primary has made it possible for him to literally promise nothing for this next term thus far. So you can see how the third-party effort was not successful in bringing about whatever revolutionary change people want to see. And the process that Bernie engaged in and that Marianne Williamson is engaging in now was far more effective in actually delivering results. And that's what...
That's not what third parties are for, Krystal. Oh, my God. Oh, my God.
Focused on.
So, first of all, you, I think, are both fundamentally, dramatically overestimating and overstating and giving way too much credit in that you can make your labor point, the student debt point, absolutely not. Joe Biden promised and coerced people to the polls by saying he was going to cancel at least $10,000 of everybody's student loan debt, and moreover, cancel all student loan debt for graduates of HBCUs. And he went down to Georgia, a state that he not only needed to win for the presidency, but needed to win for the Senate, and where there are 3 of the major HBCUs in the United States of America, made that promise, and people knocked doors and turned people out to the polls on the basis of that promise, which he immediately stopped talking about the second he got elected and reneged upon. He also knew the authority that he had to cancel all student debt. And I know because all of these student debt advocates have been talking about how they were directly liaising with his office and communicating these points, and they chose to ignore them and do a plan that he knew could be obstructed. You can say it's not a conspiracy theory, that's conspiratorial thinking, but it's either a conspiracy or he's an idiot. Those are the options. And I'm not especially comfortable in validating either of those things. Now, you were saying that you were looking through the prism of your own perspective.
No, I was saying I expected nothing from him, like we all expected nothing from him.
Absolutely not. The people that he promised.
I expected nothing from him. I expected nothing of Joe Biden. He was the guy who brought us NAFTA. He's the guy who brought us the Iraq War. He's the guy who wrote the Patriot Act, who wrote the crime bill.
You expected nothing from him, but at the same time, I think it's important to be said, you don't need anything from him, Kyle. Smash that like button, guys, if you haven't had a chance to do so. That helps with the algo. This is important and it needs to be said. Kyle didn't need these things. He didn't need anything from Joe Biden. Some of us do. Some of us need shit. Let me continue.
Nothing of him.
When a presidential candidate makes a promise to people and lies to them in order to get them to go to the polls, I believe that it's my job as a member of independent media to make it clear so that people don't fall for those kinds of mistakes going forward. People, if Biden wants to run as I'm a milquetoast incrementalist who's just better than Trump, he can feel free to do that all day and night, and then he would have lived up to the expectations that he set for himself in the context of a primary campaign.
He did run as a milquetoast.
He promised to cancel all student debt for every graduate of an HBCU and $10,000 to $20,000 of student debt for people who earn less than $125,000 a year. Now, that might not matter to you, and I defend you guys against claims that, you don't care about this stuff because, you're out of touch and it doesn't affect you and material. I think that some of those claims get really silly and overly personalized. But Biden made a choice to tell 44 million Americans who have student debt that he was not only going to not fulfill his promise to them, but that in the middle of the debt ceiling argument of a couple of months ago, the one thing that he was going to bargain away to get the debt ceiling passed was ending the student loan moratorium. So now it's not me. I'm not the one in control of whoever votes. He has to make the case to those 44 million Americans who's he's starting their student debt up. That's right months before an election.
Bree is really good at this. And I also want to say too, let's not forget about the promise that Joe Biden made to the students that went to historically Black colleges. He purposely lied to Black students' face. And a lot of those of us that African American, we graduate with a lot of student loan debt. And he lied to us to get those damn votes, and he didn't deliver. Now, yes, that's a problem. Now, Krystal and Kyle, again, they ain't got to worry about this. You see what I mean? They ain't got to worry about this. They not affected. That's part of the problem. They're not affected, but also they are not engaging with the people who are affected. Let's continue a little bit more. This is getting good.
Stronger or weaker than what you expected? Because it's way stronger than what I expected.
Hold on.
Way weaker than what I expected.
But I expected nothing from him on student debt. Nothing.
The real question, though, is we all want all of the debt to be canceled.
Duh. Yeah, of course.
What is the most likely path to get us there?
And not Joe Biden, obviously.
Hold on. But I don't see how Cornel West getting 5% of the vote and unintentionally helping to reelect Trump, that doesn't get us there at all.
It doesn't. Let me say something real quick. These two, it's just like they sound just like MSNBC. They're saying the same things that you hear on MSNBC. And then they get upset when people are saying we're captured by the DNC because you sound just like these people. You sound just like them. Obviously, it is very clear to me that Krystal and Kyle still don't understand the point of third party. The goal is to get to the 5%, to get the federal funding, then to get to the 15%, then you're on the debate stage. But there is an overall goal of creating a movement and building something. And what has become very apparent to me is that Krystal and Kyle ain't really trying to build shit. What they want to do is they want to work with something that's already built and established, and they just want to add a couple of chairs in an empty room. You see the difference? There's a difference between building something and using something that's already built and you just adding a couple of chairs in an empty room. There is a big difference. One of those paths is a lot easier, but I'm not always asking for easy. And we need to talk about, when we talk about getting rid of corporate greed, getting the corporate money out of electoral politics, if you two sit here and tell people to go ahead and support Joe Biden, who is corporate, or any other freaking corporate Democrat politician, then the left loses all fucking credibility because you're showing that the left is not willing to hold the damn line. And if you're not willing to hold the line, there is no fucking movement, boo. There's no movement. I can't even believe I have to say this. It's been very clear to me over the past couple of years watching left independent media, some people are just not fucking fighters. Some people ain't never had to fight for anything. Some people never had to dig their way out of fucking holes. And it's very clear to me that a lot of these people had shit given to them from the day that they were born. And some of us had to fucking fight for what we got. Now, this is not to say if you didn't have to fight for anything, you're not willing to do it now. But it is to say that if you never had to fight for shit, it's a lot easier for you to walk away. This is why there's no left movement. It's not just because Bernie Sanders, it's because the people or whatever that's left of this are not willing to hold the line. This is a mess. Just it's crazy. Just call it what it is. Just call it what it is. Just say that you want to go along with Joe Biden. You want to say go ahead and support the Democratic Party regardless, because at the end of the day, it's about you building a brand and you having access to people in DC. That's what this is really about. Why do you think Ryan Grimm's on Breaking Points? Isn't he the one that has the access? Let's continue.
To that. Let's get into that. So for
whereas if you have a primary contender actually able face to face to pressure him, we have seen the way that can potentially work.
Those things aren't mutually exclusive. So why is that an argument against Cornel West?
It doesn't have to be exclusive, but do you think that the project of defeating Trump is worthwhile at all? Because I would turn back on you. You asked the question, like, where's the bottom of the lesser evil question? Like, where does that end?
Defeating Donald Trump does not change the system. And I want to say this very loud and clear for everybody to hear and understand this. Defeating Donald Trump with the Democratic Party doesn't make any changes. It doesn't change the system. Yes, Orange Man Bad won't be in there, but people's lives are not improving in this country. The life expectancy in this country is decreasing. Does Krystal understand that? Does Kyle understand that? Why do you think we have a lower life expectancy in this country when compared to other countries? We don't have health care for everybody. People are dying. And I don't understand how I can make that more explicit. But as long as this system continues the way that it is, where the corporations have all the control, the life expectancy will continue to decrease. Now, maybe not for them because they're wealthy. Wealthy people typically will live longer. They have more resources. But when I talk about things, especially for my community, for the people who tried to tell me, no, don't talk about race, just talk about class. When I talk about things for my community, you got to really understand when it comes to the Black communities in this country, our life expectancy is even lower. We're the ones less likely to have health insurance. It's Black women who are dying in the ER when they're giving birth. Now, those things may not matter to Krystal and Kyle, but they need to honestly sit back and take a look at themselves and take a look at their surroundings and ask some hard-ass questions and face some hard-ass truths, because this is a big wake-up call for people, like I said before. If the left is not willing to hold the damn line, then there's no fucking left.
I would turn it back on you and say, where does it become not just a lesser evil, but like, actually, this person is significantly better? And I would say that Biden, for my disappointments with him, for all of the things that I talk about plenty, including disappointments on student loan debt, including on the pandemic relief that I talked about, including on the railway, all these things, right? Ukraine. At what point, though, do you acknowledge that this person is a lot better than Donald Trump? And so when you're in this binary choice where let's not pretend like Cornel West is going to be president of the United States.
A lot better than Donald Trump in reference to what, though? Because for people who are voting based on the economy, I'm going to keep it real. I don't like Biden. I don't like Donald Trump. This is not support for Donald Trump. I want to make that very clear. But I'm going to keep it real. Because when I look at the numbers, something tell me the math ain't mathing. Because according to the numbers, my personal numbers, I'm going to tell you, the economy was a lot better under Donald Trump. These grocery store prices were not as high as they are now. I know that damn much. Gas is higher. So when you say someone is so much better, on what issue? And if a lot of people are more concerned about the economy, and that is what the polls are showing, a lot of people vote with their pocketbook. And that's a big point to think about. And particularly people who are on a fixed income. So people who are retired, people who are on disability, people on those fixed incomes, when the prices go up, they have to stretch that money further. So this is a big reality people got to understand. Where's the economy now compared to where it was then when Trump was in office? And yes, as time goes by, things are going to increase, but you can't sit here and pretend like the inflation is not a fucking problem. And that's the number one issue for people in this country right now is the economy.
It is worth making the choice in that situation to reelect Joe Biden and get the NLRB and get the antitrust stuff and get what is at hand to be gotten in this moment and live to fight another day.
So for one, Krystal, somebody might say, and people did make this exact argument against Bernie Sanders. Fine, he's on the stage, but I'm not going to vote for him. I'm not going to weaken the person who's ultimately obviously going to be the president of the United States. Why not vote for Biden in the primaries? Why? And you're wrinkling your brow because it's a ridiculous argument. I completely agree. I don't see the argument for Marianne and against Cornel West. They have nothing to do with each other. You can vote for Marianne in a primary. You can be happy that she's on the debate stage, which obviously they aren't allowing, which is material to this argument, I've got to say. Some people you're saying, what is the Green Party going to do? The Democratic Party has demonstrated that it won't host a free and fair and open primary.
Wait, I get that. But how does Cornel West getting 5% of the vote and helping unintentionally to reelect Trump, how does that move us towards our goals?
So two things. One, you said this in the now viral clip, that just framing Cornel West as the spoiler, looking at those polls. In those polls that you referenced, Biden is losing in both of them, with or without Cornel West in the race. Now,
but Cornel West makes it worse.
Cornel West makes incremental worse.
I just want to clarify one thing. I'm not blaming people or saying like it's their fault for Trump getting reelected or whatever. But I am saying we would like it if the way the Democratic Party responded to Cornel West would be to cancel all the student loan. But we know that's not reality. We know that what
Cornel West is not looking for. See, again, this is what she just doesn't seem to understand. Third-party candidates are not looking towards the Democratic Party to do anything for them, just like they're not looking towards the Republican Party to do anything for them. She can't get her head out of this binary way of thinking.
What to happen and the reality of what will happen are two very different things.
Let's get to the second point.
Yeah.
You framed the 2016 votes for Jill Stein and the reaction of the Democratic Party subsequently as evidence that a concerted movement effort to withhold one's votes has been proven ineffective. It is obviously the case, Krystal, that there was not a concerted effort in 2016 or any kind of structural movement to withhold one's vote for Hillary Clinton in favor of Jill Stein. It was just a bunch of us angry Bernie bros. A very small number, by the way, because we all know sitting here that more Bernie Sanders voters in 2016 bent the knee and voted for Hillary Clinton than Hillary Clinton voters in 2008 bent the knee and voted for Barack Obama. We all know these statistics. We've been saying them back at neoliberals for the last 5, 6, whatever years. That being said, there was no argument to control the media narrative and present an opportunity for actual leverage and change. So there wasn't like a group, there was no spokesperson, there was no politician, there was no left media that was saying, here, I have a organized movement, an organized group of people who are willing to actually change their mind and vote for the Democratic nominee in exchange for various concessions. That didn't exist. And I'm, by the way, not advocating for it. I know that some of my friends like Nathan Robinson have said that Cornel West should do exactly that, say that he'd be willing to drop out in exchange for various concessions. I think that's better than nothing. I think that's more than, frankly, I love Marianne and I hope she's successful, but that's more than Marianne is likely to get out of this. However, that is not even my plan, my perspective.
Yeah.
What I am saying, though, is that knowing that the Democratic Party is fundamentally not willing to be fair. They're willing to rig the election. They're willing to change the order of the states. They are willing to completely block Marianne out of the media. It feels rich to say that running within the Democratic Party is manifestly and demonstrably more effective in actually changing the outcomes
because of the structural barriers,
than Cornel West, who at very least, you keep being very dismissive, Kyle, about this 5% matching funds.
First of all, I've said like 2 words in the past 10 minutes, okay? So I'm not being dismissive.
That is true. Maybe the conversation could have just been between Bree and Krystal, because Kyle's just been sitting there for quite a while.
This is about anything. I haven't gotten a fucking word in.
Okay. What is it that you're chomping at the bit
It's the structural barriers against running as a third party. As rigged as it is by the DNC against outsider Democrats, which it definitely is, it's even more rigged against third parties, which is why they always get like 3% of the vote.
Which is literally.
But Kyle, you're just admitting that it is rigged by the DNC. So you're admitting to your audience that you know that Marianne Williamson is not going to get that nomination, yet you still push them. So what they're openly admitting is that at the end of the day, they're really asking their audience to vote for Joe Biden. And if that's the case, you can just go ahead and stop calling your show like this progressive show or whatever, and just call yourself David Pakman 2.0, boo. Because that's what David Pakman did.
Bernie got 43% of the vote.
Which is literally why people feel it is a structural advantage to get someone like Cornel West to 5% of the vote so they can get federal matching funds. To me, as
He'd
a
get
voter,
40% as a Democrat.
For me, as a voter in New York, I'm not interested in shoring up the Democratic Party.
No, that's him getting his ideas out. It's shoring up Cornel West. That's the whole point.
I am not a Democrat.
Cornel West is doing just fine getting his ideas out, don't you guys think? Cornel West has been on CNN, MSNBC. He's been on Fox News. He's been on pretty much all of left independent media for the most part. Cornel West has been getting his ideas out very well, I might add, because of who he is, because he's very popular. A lot of people love Dr. West. He's had no problems with getting his ideas out. And the fact that Kyle Kulinski is going to sit here and say, because if he's running through the Democratic Party, he gets more of his ideas out, that doesn't apply in the case of Cornel West because he's been on mainstream media multiple times since he has announced his run. So he seems to be just fine getting his message out. So what is it really about, Kyle? Just tell people at the end of the day that you're a Democrat. Just tell people at the end of the day you're still going to support the Democratic Party no matter if the candidate is progressive or not. And if that's the case, then just fucking say that and let it be what it is. Call up David Pakman. You guys can apologize to each other, maybe do a combined show or some shit, but just admit to people you just here to tell people to vote for the Democratic Party. Now, I'm not going to be able to do the whole thing because it is a long debate, but it's on Bad Faith Debate. Vote for Joe Biden versus Cornel West. Let's give it a like, Eric. Whee! All right. But that actually brings me into the next story, which is what's happening to RFK Jr. See, hey, that worked out, guys. I didn't plan on doing that because I didn't know it was up already, but that worked out just great. So let's go to some of the comments and then we'll get into the RFK Jr. issue with the DNC as well. It's happening all across the board. I told you, these are just perfect examples. Perfect timing for, I forget who it was that shouted it out to me in the chat. Thank you for the super chat. Skyzer, Sabby, one can tell you were a teacher, a great one indeed. Thanks for what you do. Thank you, Skyer. Thank you, Black Thoughts. I watched and cringe. They gave Runaway Colored vibe. They get oh man, how dare you not think how I demand? I know what's best for you. The KKK always comes out. Yikes. Thank you, Luis. I also live in Virginia. I voted third party and will do it again. She is delusional. Thanks, Black Thoughts. Bree ended them from a Black Trump guy perspective. Thank you, Roger. Krystal running around here sounding like Joy Behar. Thank you again, Roger. Damn, Kyle, her stuff is that good. Stop it, Roger. Thank you again, Roger. Who got leash around neck walking on all four in the... You know what? I'm going to the next one. Thank you, Bobo Mojos. Love this. Sabby dunking on these rich shills. Thank you, Roger. Krystal walking Kyle like a dog. You may speak my love. Oh my God. Thank you, Solomon. Sabrina, you're doing a great show. I like the way you explain politics. Thank you, Solomon. Thank you, Keith. I don't recognize K&K at all anymore. Unreal. Thank you, Skyzar. Now I see it. It isn't lack of guts what Democrat voters have. It's lack of morals it shows. Shout out to Monty Love, who sends a super sticker. Thank you, Matt. Our society is evil. There is no more lesser of two evils. We are just evil. Thank you for the super sticker, Michael Pino. Thank you, Duckzilla. Biden's losing in most polls to Republicans now. Yeah, it's pretty bad for Biden. Thank you, Yesem. No, we don't have to be in this binary choice system, Krystal. This is why I will vote for Cornel West. And thank you for the super sticker, Fat Man TV. Thank you.